Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Fabiana, Executive Director of the Canadian Premature Babies Foundation. CPBF is a charitable organization, and our mission is to support and educate families of premature babies. This Preemie Chat series is one of the many initiatives we have to bring information for NICU families and healthcare professionals. Here every Friday, we talk with experts, researchers, and parents who share with us their experience and knowledge. Also on our website, canadianpreemies.org, parents will find all kinds of resources and support. And today we're going to talk about the short and long-term impact of prematurity on the siblings. The birth of a premature infant has a profound effect on the family, and many require a large portion of parental time, attention, finances, and psychological support. During all this time, the sibling might feel confused and left out of the loop and might resent the amount of time the parents are away with the new infant in their NICU. If the preemie is found to have a disability, these issues are compounded as the parents might be grieving and require further time away to attend several appointments. In this session, Dr. Saigal will discuss strategies to support siblings of premature babies. And I have her here join me live from Hamilton, Ontario, Dr. Saroj Saigal, who is a neonatologist and currently Professor Emerita at McMaster University in Canada. She's internationally recognized for her long-term studies to adulthood, which focus on the quality of life and consequences of having been born extremely prematurely. She has also participated as a collaborator in several multi-center randomized perinatal clinical trials. Dr. Saigal co-founded Adult-Born Preterm International Collaboration and invited collaborators from around the world who are doing studies on premature infants at adulthood to participate in data sharing. She is the recipient of many awards from the Canadian Pediatric Society and the American Academy of Pediatrics. She was awarded the 2018 Virginia Apgar Award of the American Pediatric Society for distinguished contributions to perinatal medicine. She was also recognized by her alma mater with the McMaster Faculty of Health Science Community of Distinction Award in 2018. Dr. Saigal is also the author of Preemie Voices, this incredible book and documentary we're going to be discussing a little bit later on. Dr. Saigal, thank you so much for joining us here today. It's such a pleasure to have you sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your expertise with our audience.
My privilege. Can I go now to the sharing?
Yes, now you can share your screen. And for all of you watching us from home or from the hospital, either on our Facebook or YouTube channel, please send your comments, share your experiences, and ask your questions. And we're going to be addressing them at the end of Dr. Saigal's presentation. Dr. Saigal, the floor is yours.
Okay, that's good. So I'm going to be talking about the short and long-term impact of prematurity. And if I can get my act together. Okay. So first of all, I want to pay tribute to fabulous Fabiana, as I call her, FF. It's my privilege to know her for several years, and she is absolutely amazing. She spent a lot of time in the NICU with her twins. She lost one child and was in the NICU for 146 days with Gabriel. And subsequently, she is looking after the children and spending a lot of time. And also this Canadian Foundation, this chat line is absolutely amazing. And she's been a volunteer and a researcher and looks after both children with special attention to the sibling of Gabriel, who has cerebral palsy. And that's Thomas, who's 12 years old now, I believe. So my hat's off to you, and I will proceed now. So when there's news of a pregnancy, it's very exciting for everybody, the friends, family, siblings, grandparents, and friends. And these days, children are involved a lot with the journey of the growing belly, with ultrasound pictures, sex reveal of the baby, which is sometimes people have parties of that, reading and singing for the baby in utero, and setting up the nursery. and then suddenly crash. There's unexpected birth of a premature baby. And of course, the parents are distressed and in shock and despair. And the sibling who is confused. So when the baby is born, the sibling is separated again from the family and feels abandoned. And unfortunately, as in the case of Fabiana, you can stay in the NICU for 100 days or over, and the parents have to juggle with the complex needs of the new baby and also looking after the other children. And the mom is gone for extended periods in the NICU because she expresses the milk for the baby and then spends sleepless nights fretting about the baby. And the sibling was promised a baby. So they say, Mom, where is the baby? When is he coming home? And parents are very protective and they try and shield the child from any of the illnesses, etc. But this is well intentioned. But again, the sibling needs to know, and there needs to be transparency, and the parents need to tell the sibling and to understand the condition of the baby and reassure them that the baby is progressing well. Parents are emotionally torn, and it's understandable. Although the baby has to be their focus, they worry about the other children that they've left behind at home. And the NICU also is a very distressing place, an overwhelming environment, and for the parents, and of course also for the sibling. So when the sibling is in the NICU, the preemie is in the NICU, the sibling needs to know the truth. Children have an unbelievable imagination, and they can imagine all kinds of upsetting pictures of what the baby looks like. So the parents need to bring pictures of the new baby. And it can be frightening with the tubes and IV lines, but when you explain to the child what the IV line does and what the tubes do, they can understand. Now, the older children sometimes feel guilty that they're healthy, and they also fear that the child may die. And there are instances even when the baby is coming home, that they're so afraid that the child might die. And parents need to listen and support them. And it's very important, and I will reiterate several times, the siblings need reassurance that the baby's illness is not their fault for bad behavior or jealousy. So when the preemie is in the NICU, these days, most NICUs have family-centered care. But with the family-centered care, the children are there, but there's no program for the children, nothing to help the children be separated from the NICU environment. And a visit to the NICU can be helpful for the sibling, but it's also scary, and the child has to be fully prepared. And these days, you'll see lots of incubators have drawings of pictures that the siblings have done, or writing a note or a letter to the baby, which is attached to the incubator. But the parents, when they go home, they should make special time for the siblings and read bedtime stories. And you can incorporate the pictures of the newborn baby with it. And if that cannot be done, family members need support from friends for the sibling. And phone never rings. One woman's sibling support, Joe Shalom, gave birth to a premature twins, not unlike the story of Fabiana. And one twin died in the NICU while the brother has cerebral palsy. The family lived with the grief for one child and worry about the other. Meanwhile, the older sibling, who was 9 years, had to sit through with the parents and had nowhere else to go. And Joe launched a volunteer program in the name of the deceased child called Noah's Ark. And I'm always amazed at how strong women can be. You can't imagine what women do under the circumstances. And Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, "A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she gets in hot water." There are several books on preemies. Now, when I was doing this talk, I was amazed at the information that's available on Google. So these books can help the sibling to explain everything. Now, when the sibling, which is the preemie, comes home, the siblings at home should get involved with caregiving, and it's an opportunity for parents to talk about the baby. And kangaroo care is something they can do and bond with the baby, and they can read stories with the sibling and spend exclusive time with them. Now, other things that are important are that there should be special outings with just the sibling, so that and also special events should be separated. It should be celebrated. And I read about one child who was so upset the tooth fairy didn't come because the baby was so sick and parents were busy. And this may be a minor issue that the tooth fairy didn't put some money in, but it was a big deal for the siblings. So one has to make sure that all the events are separated and they get plenty of attention. Sometimes one has to make decisions in the NICU around a critically ill child, and the parents are asked to whether to continue or withdraw intensive care. Sometimes these decisions are made before the baby is born, which is an unknown. But at other times, when the baby is critically ill, the parents now are bonded to the infant because they've seen the infant, they love their infant. And it's very hard to make this decision. And most parents decide to continue intensive care despite the fact that they're told that there's a high probability of disabilities, because they feel they cannot live with themselves if they'll always have regrets that they didn't give the baby a chance. And they always hope against hope that the infant beats the odds. And it does happen sometimes. But the future, of course, is unknown. And there are many factors that have to be taken into consideration when you make decisions around critically ill newborns. But most people do not consider the impact on the siblings. And this area should be looked into as well. Now, unfortunately, some preemies die in the NICU. And of course, the parents are devastated, but the child also, it's very important to help the child. Some children may subconsciously wish that the baby dies because they want the parents back to themselves. They want, like it used to be in the old days, because they feel less loved and wanted. So the parents need to tell the child it is not their fault. And one has to explain, if you don't talk, if you don't communicate, that's worse than death. And the news can be disclosed gently and with explanation to reduce the stress of the child. And they will also be very sad and feel guilty. But most importantly, after the baby has died, even though the parents are grieving, they should really give full attention to the sibling. Unfortunately, sometimes children have disabilities, and here we have a sign handicapped child at play. And these days, we do not use handicap, we use disabilities, and we don't have hospitals for crippled children or hospitals for the criminally insane. We are more sensitive to this. So what happens when a child has a disability? It obviously has a profound effect on the entire family. And it is well known that growing up with a sibling who has disability has positive or negative effects on the non-disabled sibling. Some non-disabled siblings do very well, and they feel that they have more sympathy and have grown and have rich experiences, and that they are better people because of having a sibling who is disabled. And others say that their life is messed up because living with a child with a disability has been really hard. So many siblings struggle emotionally. They want the parents' attention, and they want it equally to that of the sibling with disability, although they know that the sibling with disability needs more attention. But really, sometimes non-disabled children can be pushed aside unintentionally because the other child has a disability and needs more attention. So each child's reaction to having a sibling with a disability varies depending on the age of the child. Younger children can also have major problems. They can act up because they want attention somehow or the other, or they may become withdrawn. They regress to thumb sucking, bedwetting, sometimes even stealing or trouble at school, all to get attention. Non-disabled younger siblings resent the time that the parents are devoting to the sibling with a disability. I have this wrong word, and perceive it as rejection and wonder why they love the disabled child more. Young adults, on the other hand, because they are dating and socializing and living with teens, they worry whether their friends will accept the disability. And they also know that if they marry, the burden regarding future responsibilities for the sibling can be quite profound. So parental care for a disabled child should be that parents should recognize that the child is also going through some stress and provide opportunities for normal life, sharing secrets, having family activities, going out. And most importantly, many of the children in the studies that I did want parents to avoid double standard in disciplining siblings. And when the siblings fight, let them settle their own differences and not to say, oh, your poor brother, look after him and give in to him. They shouldn't have double standards. I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't be sheltering the child, but still, the differences can make the sibling very upset. And sometimes you may need counselors and social workers when children are very upset. And again, there are lots of books for siblings with special needs in Google. You can do that. And for every age, there are books. So looking after the child with a disability, of course, is challenging. But most importantly, parents should try and ensure that this child is independent, and that the reality is that when the child grows, that they should be being more independent. And this family professionals strive to accent abilities of disabilities. And I didn't know this word ableism existed, and not to protect and shelter all the time. And the child with disability should participate in all the family activities. And again, there was one issue that the siblings raised, is that they get to do all the chores. He gets to make a mess and we have to clean up. So the child, depending on his abilities, should be given some chores to do. And the child should be encouraged to participate in all family activities. And when needed, the parents should seek educational and vocational resources for the child with a disability. One has to plan for a future child with a disability because there's an unspoken assumption, no one says it, but the sibling knows that when the parents are older or deceased, that they will be responsible for this disabled sibling, whether they're older or younger. So one should have discussions when the children are adults or older teenagers about how much responsibility are they willing to take. And parents should make arrangements for guardianship and power of attorney, as well as financial arrangements for the future, because the expenses can be quite profound. If in the unlikelihood that the child needs institutional care, these arrangements should be made in advance. And the disabled sibling, when the sibling can participate, should be party to these arrangements. The siblings are really lovely. They can listen and help support the disabled sibling. Now, one other factor that's important is that bullying is very common. It's common in children born at term as well, but in the preemies, it's much more common because they're smaller, they look different, or have mild to moderate problems with mobility, and even wearing glasses, they're teased. And the preemies are known to be shy and lack confidence. And so what is the sibling to do? The parents will always say, why didn't you protect your sibling when people were teasing? But the sibling is afraid that they may have repercussions on themselves, and they cannot play this role of an unofficial bodyguard. And the sibling then feels resentful. So siblings should be encouraged to involve the disabled sibling in activities and try not to feel ashamed or embarrassed. And it's also a teaching point with their friends that they bring the sibling with them. And the friends also learn to be more sympathetic to individuals with disabilities. So here from the book of Preemie Voices that Fabiana talked about, a young woman, April, she's in her mid-30s, writes poignantly that having a case of a mild cerebral palsy is a mixed blessing. Although there was a continuum of compassion for those with severe disabilities, I, on the other hand, was too close to normal, yet far enough from it to be scary. So this young woman sometimes didn't go back to school after lunch and used to read a lot. And she worked very hard, and she earned a master's degree and is doing really well by herself. So there's a video as well, preemievoicesbook.com, where the young people talk about their experiences. Unfortunately, there's a reality that divorce is more common among families, couples with special needs child than the rest of the married population. And when a child has a disability, the participation of each parent can vary. And sometimes men focus more on work to get away from the atmosphere of looking after a disabled child. And the mother has to raise the child at home, leaving her own career. But this is not true for all fathers. Many fathers are involved, and I see that all the time when I see patients in the follow-up clinic. But sometimes it does happen that the women do the most work. So with a divorce, there's an extra burden on the sibling, because when you have co-parenting, the sibling is the one who takes the disabled brother or sister and moves back and forth between homes. That's not easy because there's differences in the environment of the home, in the structure, in the caregiving and in disciplining, etc. Sometimes fathers will indulge the child with a disability much more because they see them, not too frequently. And when they go back, then it's a different atmosphere. And it should be reiterated that no child, whether disabled or normal sibling, is responsible for the dissolution of the parents' marriage. And this, again, I'm saying it has to be emphasized. If you don't say it, they won't know. And here is a sad picture of a child who's depicting two parental houses. So I want to also mention that individuals who have disabilities value their life highly, and all our studies have shown that they, feel very good about themselves, having achieved whatever they want to do despite the disabilities. And most of the premature young adults seem to enjoy a healthy and fulfilling life. And this message must not be lost. And here is a young woman who says, "This is the only life I know, and I'm happy." Now, lastly, I'm going to talk about a qualitative study that we did of siblings of ELBW, young adults with disabilities. I always wondered how the siblings were doing, and with the participation of nurses who were who know much more about qualitative studies, we did the study with 28 siblings of 47 young adults in our cohort. And this was it was an open forum, and there are several themes emerged from that, and I'll just present the themes. So guilt and blame. So one former preemie says, "We were 3 months premature. We weren't expected to live. My sister twin got the disability, cerebral palsy, because she was the first one out. If I'd been the first one out, I would have got it." How tragic that she's in her 30s and she still doesn't know why she didn't get it and why her sibling got it, and she's still fretting about that. So this is because we don't explain things to the siblings. Another sibling said, I remember when my mom was pregnant, I used to punch her in the belly because when I was 4, I thought it was fun. And then my sister came out premature and blind, and I was like, oh my God, I made her blind. And she started to cry during this interview. It took me a long time to figure out that it wasn't my fault. I wish they told me. So again, you have to be candid with them. Then there's frustration and loyalty. You know, when they were young, the mother would say, oh, well, don't worry, he broke the toy. But she says, I'm not going to let him break my toy, so forget that. But then later on, she calms down and says, I was never ashamed of having a mentally handicapped brother. And mostly, every time I see him, I'll hug him. And if he died, I'd be crushed. And then she then wishes that he's self-sufficient. She knows that he's never going to be a CEO or hold high offices, but she says, whatever he chooses to do, I hope that he's happy. Responsibilities for life. This is a younger sibling who says, if he's still living at home and my parents pass on, there will be no question that he can come and live with me if he feels the need to do so. But an older sibling who has her family says, I'm moving forward, I've got kids to take care of. So that's going to put a dent on how much I can pick up the ball. So it's not easy for the sibling. They feel responsible, but sometimes they cannot do it. Then this differential disciplining came several times in the interviews. And one of them says, I noticed my parents treating him a lot differently, as he could have died, so we cut more slack. When does it stop mattering that he would have died? When does he have to start to behave, not throw temper tantrums and embarrass me in public? And I'm not allowed to yell or hit him. You had to be nice to him because he could have died thing. She repeated all the time. The siblings' perception of abilities has also to be taken into consideration. Parents look at their child with different eyes, but the siblings know the capabilities of their child sibling with disabilities, and they're more realistic than parents. Parents have obviously a soft spot and feel constantly sorry for the child with their disability. So this sibling says, my parents have to be stricter with my brother who's in his 20s. He's still sitting in the basement playing on the internet, not working and having his meat cut for dinner. And another sibling says, he cuts grass when he goes to his dad's house. Why can't he do it here? So again, they behave differently, knowing which parent they play on the parents when they're younger. And another sibling says, it's a big, bad world. Eventually, they're going to be on their own. So you've got to start pushing them and not wait until crunch time. And that's a realistic view. So in summary, some siblings cried during these interviews. They were very touched that for the first time, someone had tried to find out how they felt living with a sibling with disabilities, because no one had asked them. The parents always said, you're the normal one. You have nothing to complain about. Our interviewer also was crying all through these interviews because they were really very personal and heartfelt. And siblings generally were very protective of the sibling with a disability, but they still resented the special privileges that were given to the sibling with a disability. They felt responsible, yet wanted a life of their own. And lastly, they objected to unacceptable behavior of the general public towards people with disabilities. So these preemies' advice to parents from normal sibling is that you have to be honest about the preemie sibling's condition when the sibling is in the NICU and update them. And you're not to protect siblings from bad stuff. And you're to spend special time with the non-disabled children. And firmly, they wanted no differential disciplining. And they want parents to recognize the capabilities of the disabled child and prepare them for the future real life experiences instead of constantly sheltering them and doing things for them. And parents should remember that being a sibling never stops through the lifespan, and they have to support them. So the final message regarding siblings of preemies is that there's a unique bond among siblings, whether they're normal or have a disability, and that relationship can foster positive growth in the entire family. And siblings really they're special people. They need lots of support and reassurance to build a bond with the preemie sibling with love and not perceive it as a burden and something they have to do. And one wise sibling wrote, "We will become caregivers for our siblings once parents no longer can. Anyone interested in the welfare of people with disabilities ought to be interested in us." So I also want to acknowledge with gratitude, the ELBW and normal participants and their families who've worked with us for decades. And the work would not be possible without all my collaborators, researchers, and mentors. And bravo for the siblings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saigal. I almost made through the end without crying. This hits home big time, as you mentioned my story in the beginning. Thank you for acknowledging that. I have incredible admiration and gratitude for the work that you do. And the first time I heard you speak, it was the first time I actually learned about your work, was in Colombia when you went to a conference in Bogota, and you shared that same quote about the sibling who kicked mom's belly when she was pregnant and the baby was blind. And the person said, "I wish I was told it wasn't my fault." I don't know if you know that story, but that day I had to leave the room and call my husband in Canada. And I told my husband, "Please tell Thomas it wasn't his fault." It was the first time that I actually acknowledged my older son's experience of being a sibling of a surviving twin, and he was only 3 years old at the time. So I think you opened my eyes big time on this issue of the siblings and how to deal with the siblings and how to support them in this journey, because it is, as you mentioned, it is a family journey. It's not only the preemie child. So I'm going to add here some comments from our live audience. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us and participate. We have here Juliette from the Netherlands. She was born preterm with 28 weeks in 1980. Thank you, Juliette, for joining us today. And we also have Michelle from Vancouver. Michelle is also on our family advisory committee. BC Women's NICU has a volunteer sibling support program pre-COVID, when you're happy to share materials with any other hospitals interested in learning more. That is great, Michelle. Thank you so much. And if you're, we could make the materials available also on the CPBF website. We have Dr. Hannah from Leeds, England. And I have, so this is a question that I have for you, but I'm going to open with Laurie's comment. So she said, "I drove myself to the hospital during the night. I felt something was wrong, but wasn't expecting an emergency C-section at 32 weeks. Baby and I were separated and transferred to another province. I never even told my other 4 kids I was leaving. Once admitted to hospital in another province, I had to choose between my kids, age 17, 13, 9, and 7 at the time, and staying with my 32-weeker. Due to the pandemic, I was not allowed to see my kids or husband for 38 days. The comment is cut off there. But I have here, I don't know if my kids will ever get over my sudden disappearance in the early days of the pandemic. We have had issues with separation, anxiety, nightmares, behavior outbursts, and mistrust since our preemie was born. They are also happy with their baby brother, but I carry a lot of mom guilt. We all agree it was hard, but losing him would have been a much harder alternative. I had a late miscarriage before him, so we are all very thankful despite challenges." Laurie, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Dr. Saigal, I think that leads to my question, because since the pandemic started, siblings are not allowed to come to the hospital. Mm-hmm. So how do you see this impacting families and the siblings themselves during this time?
Well, again, I think it's very hard, and the same. The message is the same, that you can get other people to get involved, grandparents, friends, family, get involved and give the child special time and explain to the child. And the children can understand. I mean, very young children understand you have to put on masks. So they understand that it's not the fault of their parents that they are separated, but one has to tell them.
Okay, so we have here a hello from the Blything family. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I believe they were your patients, and also from Olga, Mama Familia, and Zane. So thank you so much for joining us here today. We have a few questions actually here. Have you observed a difference of the impact, negative or positive, of prematurity in the relationship between older siblings with a close age gap, such as 10 to 15 months older, versus a larger age gap? So that is the first question.
You know, I have to say that I didn't think of all these things. They kept coming later. I started to think of them. If I had thought of these well in advance, I would have planned my studies differently. But at the time, we didn't know anything about it. So I can't tell you, because what I did was only see when they were young adults. I did not study them as children, because I was doing other things. So in hindsight, I wish somebody else would take on this challenge and look at how it affects the children who are younger and the differential age group. All I did was call the siblings that were available from my cohort. And some were younger, of course, and others were older. But that's, I cannot tell you, because this is teasing in small data, and I cannot do that.
Right.
But it's a very good question, and I'm hoping some younger investigators will look into this.
Absolutely. It's so very important. Is there a difference pre-family integrated care or center care era versus family integrated center care era observed in the relationship between siblings?
You know, the era that I'm talking about was immediately after neonatal intensive care was started. This was late 70s and early 80s, and we didn't have any concept of family-centered care. McMaster was very progressive. We had visitors all the time, any time of the day and night, and the siblings were also allowed. But I really cannot tell you any more about that. And these days there are so many programs, but we haven't studied. These are very difficult issues to study, because there's so many other factors that come into play as well. You know, the social class of the parents, the education of the parents, the surroundings, the environment, the opportunities that they have. So one cannot say that because they were involved in this family-centered care, that's what made the difference. One has to be very careful in interpretation.
Absolutely. So we have another comment here from Ashley. My mom had two preemies 11 months apart. My sister at 29 weeks, then me at 24 weeks. We had two older children at home. They had to stay with our grandparents for a while because both my sister and I were in the hospital at the same time. My preemie sister always thought I got treated differently because I was the youngest. It was more because of my personality differences. So thank you, Ashley, for your comment. And she also asked if others or yourself will continue to follow preemies as adults, and if you will expand across Canada. She's in BC. Thank you, Ashley.
Yes, I hope people do. We are trying to follow them, and they're now in their 40s, the children that I'm talking about. So it's in the dark ages that they were born. And obviously, intensive care has changed remarkably. But we can learn from the experiences that I'm talking about, even though it's outdated, the medicine is outdated. You know, we didn't have, they weren't breastfed. We didn't have all these infant parent programs. So yes, people are following all over the world now. Now, we started much earlier. We have one of the oldest children. But as Fabiana mentioned, I founded the APIC collaboration. And we have centers in Europe, a lot of centers in Europe, remarkably, and in Canada, in the US, one center, and in Australia and New Zealand. So everyone is following, and the message is the same. The majority of children are doing well. Of course, many have some have disabilities. But as adults, if you see a child with all the behavior problems, learning problems, seizures, this and that, and you think, oh my God, what is going to happen when they're adults? And it is absolutely astounding how well they've done as adults. And they're so remarkably resilient and so happy that they survived. And many of them are involved in studies now, helping us to understand what we should investigate in the future.
Absolutely. So Juliette actually does a lot of work in Europe about adult preemies, and it's pretty remarkable now to see the preemies now very involved in research and collaborating in these fields. I find it pretty amazing. Dr. Saigal, have a hello from Buenos Aires, Lydia. Nice to listen to this conference from Dr. Saigal. Thank you for joining us, Lydia. And Dr. Saigal, any final thoughts or an advice for parents who are here with us today? And like Lori, I also carry some guilt inside me. How do we move forward after the NICU stay or with our little babies?
I think the knowledge that siblings can have incredible stress and suffer and feel abandoned is important. And I don't think this was understood before. As you can see from the comments of the siblings that we investigated, they didn't know. They weren't any wiser about what was happening. So transparency is very important, and showing special attention is very important. And don't forget the tooth fairy. So it really, I just take my hat off to the siblings and to the parents who look after children with disabilities. And Fabiana, again, even though you have a child with a disability, you give of yourself so much. Whereas, when you think if I was in the same situation, I'd run away. But no, women get more strength. And so please, I wish all the best to all the parents and the siblings, and I'm so proud of them.
Thank you, Dr. Saigal. And for all the parents watching us or the professionals, Dr. Saigal's book, you can find here, premievoicesbook.com. It's such a beautiful book. The stories are absolutely inspiring and beautiful. And as one of the preemies said, the life with disabilities, all they know. And this is how I feel with my preemie. And there's a lot of testimonies on your book that are so important for all of us parents. So Dr. Saigal, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm so grateful that you took the time to share all your life experiences and your career and all your findings and learnings with our audience today. I'm very grateful.
My pleasure, my privilege.
And for all of you watching us at home, thank you so much for joining us here today. All the videos of the Preemie Chat series is available on our website, and you can find on canadianpreemies.org. And I want to thank our sponsors, AbbVie and Water Wives, for their ongoing support with our educational sessions. And we are a charitable organization, and we believe that through education and support, we can empower families, ensuring they're ready to care for their premature babies. Visit our website, consider making a donation. Together, we can create a brighter future for all the families. And I see you again next Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Stay well.